As Florida makes national headlines for becoming the world's new epicenter of COVID-19, reaching its own record highs for deaths and hospitalizations, data we've analyzed suggests the pandemic's most extreme impacts on the Sunshine State may be deadlier than what state leaders have told the public.
We're undercounting the COVID-19 related deaths.
Dr. Tom Tsai is a surgeon and health policy researcher at Harvard University. He says the true cost of the pandemic can best be described by something called excess mortality.
And across states in the United States and on a national level, we're seeing an uptick or an increased number of deaths than otherwise would have been expected or predicted during this time period.
Let me explain. This is the average number of deaths in Florida during the month of April over the past 5 years. You can see each April about 17,000 people die in our state. But this past April, that number spiked to more than 19,000, which means there were more than 2,000 deaths above and beyond what was expected under normal conditions. This is what the health world calls excess mortality.
It gives us a sense of the true magnitude of what the pandemic is.
The state only attributed COVID-19 to just over 1,000 deaths it reported in April. Dr. Tsai explains why some of the rest of those deaths could also be attributed to the pandemic.
Part of the excess mortality, excess deaths, may be due to patients or individuals with non-COVID conditions, things like heart attack or cancer or stroke, who were not able to receive care during the pandemic. They're both important in understanding the true cost of the pandemic.
A look at the past 6 months shows why health experts are concerned. From January to June, Florida reported more than 8,600 excess deaths, more than double what the state has attributed so far to COVID-19.
It's as close to a smoking gun as you'll get in statistics. It's really clear there's something going on.
Dr. Troy Quast is a health researcher at the University of South Florida. He says the increase in excess mortality data is a sign the state may be underplaying the virus and its true death toll on Florida.
It does lead you to think that there might be at least more investigation is warranted.
Dr. Tsai agrees and warns with the state's recent surge in cases, Florida's death rate will go up, while Florida's window to control it is quickly closing.
This is not the time for half measures. This is a time for focused action to truly flatten the curve on the pandemic in Florida. We don't want to see the pandemic show itself in the fatality numbers. That's too little, too late.
Call it the silent campaign behind any election, and they are the often unknown, unseen minds behind it.
I think it's going to be a quiet evening in Florida.
I hope nothing will be the equivalent of the hanging chair.
Fort Lauderdale-based Mitchell Berger and Tallahassee's Mark Dunbar are longtime election lawyers in Florida, hired by campaigns to ensure voting systems work, voting laws are followed, and voter ballots counted.
It's hours of boredom and moments of terror.
Terror they both remember well. In 2000, Dunbar helped represent the Bush campaign. Berger, former Vice President Al Gore, when Florida's infamous hanging chads and butterfly ballots forced unprecedented lawsuits, recounts, and a final decision for the nation's highest office by its highest court.
That was not fun.
20 years later, Florida's election technology won't be the issue, they say. Instead, Berger, who's now part of the Biden-Harris legal team, expects any court battle here to focus on the unprecedented surge in mail-in ballots.
If people are attempting to challenge your signature or challenge your ballot after it has been mailed, there will be people who will stand up for you.
Dunbar's focused on deadlines, specifically for votes by mail. Questions over voting deadlines are at the core of more than a dozen pre-election lawsuits filed nationwide.
When voters have to get those ballots in the mail back to the supervisors.
Absentee ballots are going to play a tremendous role in the election.
FSU Associate Professor Michael Morley studies election lawsuits. 2020, he says, is already making court history.
This is the first election cycle where we've had hundreds of cases before the election challenging virtually every aspect.
How Florida swings this time around remains to be seen. Urban counties with more voters will likely remain hot precincts for poll watchers and legal teams, gearing up for a night fueling so much projection, anticipation, and hope. This election is decided by voters and not lawyers and courts.
Hoping that all we're doing is drinking beer and eating pizza.
In 2000, we had jets fueled and ready to go. There were a lot of jets who were moving around, moving lawyers all around. I don't think you have to worry about jets this time around.
Vote early, vote by mail, vote in person, just vote. But how often are votes in Florida a crime?
You are being charged with voting fraud.
Right. Absolutely right.
Larry Wiggins is the latest Florida man to be arrested for attempting to defraud the state's election system.
What were you thinking when you went ahead and requested a mail-in ballot for your wife who is deceased?
I was thinking that they weren't going to send it, and they didn't, and I was glad they didn't.
Wiggins claims he was just testing the system when last month he requested a mail-in ballot in his late wife's name and then signed her name for it.
I just wrote down her name both times. That was it. But I wasn't,
illegal.
I didn't think they was going to send it anyway.
He's now facing 1 count of vote-by-mail fraud. One of few we found in Florida who since 2016 have voted or tried to illegally. Using court case data from Florida's Office of State Courts, we search for cases involving people charged with voting more than once in an election, and discovered in the past 4 years, the state has charged at least 6 people for casting more than one ballot in any given election.
So many people moving in and out of Florida, it seems plausible that there's more.
But Tampa-based political analyst Dr. Susan McManus says Florida election leaders have become good at finding voters registered in 2 states. The state also recently joined a national voter registry that helps flag duplicates. Still, getting caught is a 3rd-degree felony and comes with stiff penalties, up to 5 years in state prison. In the cases we reviewed, most ended up on probation. At least one dropped completely. Dave Ehrenberg is state attorney in Palm Beach County.
Building a case usually requires witnesses, evidence, and willfulness. And so it's not that easy.
The real opportunity for fraud does lie before the election itself takes place. And it usually occurs in the registration process.
Did you learn your lesson?
A lesson, oh my God.
Which brings us back to Larry Wiggins, who still believes he didn't break the law, just made a mistake. He hopes, in the end, the law votes in his favor.
I don't want to break the law anywhere. I'm a law-abiding person, and I always do the right thing.
Florida's ongoing struggle to slow the spread of COVID-19 through contact tracing is getting far more costly to taxpayers. We've learned what started as a $6 million contract with a Virginia-based company has ballooned to $50 million in just a few months as cases started to spike in the state.
This contract seems really shrouded in secrecy.
Dan Bass with the labor union Communications Workers of America represents workers of Maximus, Inc., the call center provider Florida hired to beef up its roster of contact tracers. In recent years, he says, the government contractor has been accused of underbidding contracts, understaffing jobs, and underperforming projects.
What's the MO here that you're concerned about?
Maximus can try and take advantage of situations to extract extra dollars from states for these important state contracts when the circumstances are right. And this is exactly that type of circumstance.
According to the state contract database, at the end of May, Florida agreed to pay Maximus $6 million over 4 months for contact tracing services to prevent the spread of COVID-19. By mid-July, it extended to a year. Its dollar amount more than quadrupled to $27 million. Less than a month later, the deal is now worth $50 million. But in a company earnings report this month, Maximus touts its 6-month job in Florida at $73 million. Despite numerous requests, Florida's Department of Health has yet to provide us the contract, scope of work details, or answer questions about these rising costs. In an email, a Maximus spokesperson told us it is very typical for contracts to have modifications, such as an extension to take services beyond the initial contract period or changes in staffing. Typically, for volume-driven contracts like this, there tends to be a range of possible financial scenarios that depend on the level of activities. In this case, the total value will likely range between $65 million and $75 million. That may not raise questions if the state revealed more details about its program and its performance.
I've called it a failure. I've called it abysmal. I've called it ineffective. I've called it the equivalent of not having a program.
Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber has become an outspoken critic of the state's Department of Health and its contact tracing program after watching COVID cases in his county of Miami-Dade explode.
Are taxpayers getting what they're paying for?
Yeah, I don't know whether we're getting what we're paying for because they're not keeping track of what kind of job they're doing.
The state does tell us they now have 4,400 tracers doing the job. It's unclear how many are Maximus employees or how well it's working. We've asked.
Is this how this is supposed to work?
No, it's not how it's supposed to work. In fact, it flies in the face of Florida's strong transparency laws.
Pam Marsh of Florida's First Amendment Foundation.
They have to provide performance measures so that we can have some accountability of what we are getting for our money. And at this point, it's just all in the dark, not in the sunshine.
But we're all paying for it.
All summer long, I thought that I was going back.
I used to think I was going to be a lifer.
They are Florida teachers who believe the mix of COVID in the classroom left them with no other choice but to flee from campus.
I wanted to make the decision that I felt was right for me.
For the past 3 years, Carolina Tave was deemed a highly effective elementary school teacher in Pinellas County. This year, she resigned just days before classes began.
I started hearing what was, the conditions under which I would have to work, and I didn't think that those conditions were optimal, were safe.
After spending 6 weeks trying to teach both in-person and virtual to special ed students in St. Johns County, Danielle Raposa decided to leave last Friday.
I was doing about 12 conferences a day in a 7.5-hour time span and expected to make miracles happen.
For the past month, we've combed through school district records around the state, seeking the number of teachers who have resigned, retired, or took a leave of absence since the start of school. We found hundreds. In St. Lucie County, 36 teachers dropped out halfway into the first semester, double the number this time last year. In Orange County, 118 teachers are gone, a 25% increase from this time last year. And in Hillsborough County, a district spokesperson told us they have 100 more teachers on leave right now versus a year ago. Not an unusual pattern, a district spokesperson told us in an email, adding they're not concerned.
It is not normal at all.
But the president of the state's teachers union is concerned. While there are various reasons why teachers leave in the middle of a semester, Florida's union points to the state's mandate to reopen campuses during a pandemic.
We know right now that school districts have massive shortages. They had it before COVID. It's been increased under COVID.
But by how much isn't known. The union, which has a pending lawsuit against the state for forcing in-person instruction, typically tracks teacher shortage numbers, but hasn't been able to get a reliable count this year. In Pinellas County, a district spokesperson reports 32 openings for both instructional and non-instructional staff. And search teacher on Palm Beach County's district website, and you'll get more than 850 job listings. Danielle and Carolina have moved on.
I do not regret the decision that I made under the current conditions.
Both now work for the state-run Florida Virtual School after hoping to make the classroom work, but realizing this year the risks versus rewards.
You can only do so much.